What's one mistake or decision you made that completely altered the course of your life? Forgot hamburger buns. Dad died, I become depressed, was without a job for over a year. Applied at a few different places and heard nothing back. Went to a barbecue at a friend's house and stopped at the store first. We got everything we needed, went out to the car, started packing up and realized we forgot hamburger buns. I go back in the store, I'm walking down the frozen foods aisle and run into an old co-worker, who happened to now be a manager at one of the places I applied at, months ago. Chatted it up with him for a little bit, and 3 days later, I get a call out of the blue to come in for an interview at his company he worked at. I've been with the company 18 years, all because of that chance encounter in the frozen food aisle, all because I forgot hamburger buns. One day my foreman just flat out didn't show up to work. I was vaguely familiar with what had to go on at the site, and who needed to do things, so I just started calling people, and talking to those on site saying I was filling in for him for today. Fast forward a few months and people are saying they greatly prefer me organizing jobs, and management starts giving me workers of my own. I start getting great reviews from clients and my workers are making money. Eventually my old foreman gets fired, not because of me directly, but because of some questionable antics and poor performance. Now I'm enjoying a significantly better paying and more fulfilling job. What started as a job to make a bit of money while I figured out what I want to do has turned into something with serious career potential. This is where I ended up too. Right out of high school I got a job at a machine shop so I could support myself while I went to school. Did years of working there during the day and going to school at night. It got to the point where I was really good at it and I liked going into work more than I did going to school, so I just dropped out and made my temporary job as my career. This was decades ago before tradesmen become in demand and when everyone said you needed a degree to be successful. So my decision was met with a lot of anguish from family and friends. Even though I was making good money I still felt like I let everyone down until 2008 happened. And I didn't have to worry about work while all my friends with degrees had to flip burgers to make ends meet. Then everyone started to realize that being a tradesman wasn't so bad and my esteem over my career choice improved. Now I work in the aerospace industry and make a pretty decent living at a great job with zero stress. Pretty happy now about how everything turned out. Took a painkiller at a party. Started as every other weekend thing. Then it was every weekend. Then it was hard days at work. Then it was daily before work. Then it was multiple times a day at work. I'd be snorting lines off my desk, in a call center. Then money started to run out and my dealer was like, dude, just start doing heroin, it's way cheaper, and I remember laughing in his face like, are you crazy? Then a little while later money became non-existent, and I found out I could snort heroin. Problem solved. And then a few handful of years later I found myself homeless in Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles. Going from a loving, supportive family with amazing friends, near six-figure job, everything going super great, to passing out in piles of garbage and having teeth fall out. I only got out thanks to Suboxone, but I'm so glad it exists. Moved out of the homeless shelter September 2019. Starting life over in your mid-30s is pretty shitty, but it's doable. My life is simple now and I have literally zero friends, but that's still an upgrade from where I was a short time ago. Fuck drugs. Said yes to going to the pub. I was on a backpacking trip around Europe. At a hostel in Belfast, this Australian guy, who was in the same dorm as me, asked if anyone wanted to join him for a drink. Me and a New Zealander tagged along. We had an absolutely epic night in a city under martial law. Next day we all went in different directions, but I kept in contact with the Australian. At some stage, months later, he mentions that I should come and visit him in Australia. About 6 months later I did. I had a fantastic time, traveled around Australia, and liked it so much that I applied for a residency permit. 30 years later I'm still here. It's been absolutely great, but none of that would have happened if I didn't say yes to a few beers all the way back in the 80s. I failed an easy class at university because I totally flunked studying. I was so sure it is easy I didn't study at all. I had to retake the class in which there were group projects. Second time over, I was in a team with this girl. I married her last summer. I flunked out of my first college. I imagine if I'd stayed and gotten my degree, my life would have been a lot different. Instead I ended up working for a few years, realizing the value of a degree, and restarting my life. It's made me realize that kids shouldn't be forced into college right after high school. Some of them need to work, or travel, or whatever, to figure out for themselves what their path is going to be. 18 is way too young to point a finger at someone and be like, okay, now you need to decide the rest of your life. I'm 33 and just today filled out my application to go back to college. I went at 18 and failed miserably. I had no idea why I was there. I wrote a little essay today to explain why I want to come back and why I believe I'm a different person. Writing that has put the last 13 years since college into perspective, and today feels like the beginning of the end of that chapter. I'm pumped and more than a little nervous. After my dad died when I was 21, I moved from Detroit to Portland for a change of scenery, and to get out of the rut of drinking every night with my friends. This was mid-recession, so unemployment was like 14% in Portland. I got a job working 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. in a nightclub 3 nights per week, and it sucked. Then I got laid off. I was lost, a college dropout, no money, no job, and even the promise of a mild winter didn't happen. Portland got their worst snowstorm in 30 years. I found out a college buddy lived in Portland and we connected. We went out on a Tuesday night, and we ate mushrooms. And in the moment of clarity that mushrooms give you as you are coming down, I realized how much I hated living in Portland. I texted one friend and said let's move to NYC, and texted another and said let's move to Chicago. I woke up, and they had both said no. I thought fuck it, I'll move to Chicago anyway. So I sold my car that Friday, bought a train ticket and was on a train Monday. 12 years later, I still live in Chicago. I went back to college and got my degree. I have a good job. I just celebrated my first wedding anniversary, albeit in quarantine rather than the Mexico trip we had scheduled. We have an awesome dog, and we're closing on a house next month. All of this because I took mushrooms and decided to move to Chicago. My wonderful 2-year-old daughter was not planned. But thanks to her, I decided to have a vasectomy. I had always had one slightly enlarged testicle, due to a mountain biking accident 10 years prior. My urologist had it biopsied because it didn't look right. Turns out I had had testicular cancer for an impossible to determine period of time. 4 rounds of chemo later and I'm perfectly fine. Had I not had my daughter, I would have probably had much worse results years later, when cancer finally made its presence known via pain and had spread into my body. So my daughter technically saved my life, which is knowledge I'm sure she'll use on with great glee during her teenage years when I'm trying to punish her. I lied to Child Protective Service when I was 13, I finished growing up with my dad instead of being taken away. I knew what I was doing, and looking back I wouldn't change it. I've met some wonderful people and I don't think I would have met them if I had told the truth that day. What happened with your dad, why were they there, etc., if you mind answering. It's okay if you don't, I'm just curious. My dad let me play physical sports, so that way he could beat me and the bruises wouldn't be suspicious. Well, my coach noticed that the pattern of the bruises appearing didn't coincide with games practice, so he called Child Protective Service. Overall, he was just a drunk old man abusing what power he had. I know I would have gone into the system, and that's one place I didn't want to be, because I had met kids from foster homes and they always ended up moving away after about a year. I've worked through a lot of it with a therapist, but quite frankly I kind of don't want kids. I'm scared to resemble my dad in any form. There was an incident where a good friend of mine got kicked out of where we were living. The owner called me and told me the whole thing and said I was welcome to stay because I had not created any of the problems. My friend came to tell me about it and told me we have to move out. I told her I was told something different and she snapped at me that I couldn't stay there if she wasn't there. I was too much of a coward to stand up to her and deal with the consequences of losing that friendship. So I left that house and struggled for years. School would have been easier, I could have saved, gotten a car. That was such a defining moment, and I'm so sorry I chose wrong. I was 18. A buddy of mine called me up one day to tell me he and his toxic girlfriend had broken up and he wanted to celebrate with a few drinks. At the time, I was living a very antisocial lifestyle, and I almost said no, but something that day told me I needed to get out of the house. So I agreed. Turns out that was the night I met my future wife. When we were reminiscing about that night, my wife said she, too, almost declined going out. Went to meet my bio mom. 8 years later, a crippling disorder, brain damage, and some significant trauma later. Turns out there was a very good reason I was adopted. I got to meet my sisters though, and I'm the uncle to a whole herd of nieces and nephews, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. Makes the damage worth it, honestly. The way their faces light up when they see me and how loved I feel with them is something you can't ever replace. Edit, to clarify, I met her 8 years ago. She didn't abuse me for 8 years, she abused me for 2, stalked and harassed me for 2 more, and has been out of my life for 4 years or so, since I got a restraining order. Did she hit you or something? Or did you just find out you had genetic brain issues? She is drug addict who physically, mentally, and emotionally abused me, stalked me, tried to kill me when I tried to leave, and only stopped when a restraining order came into effect. I had a psychotic break from reality due to all of this, mostly had to be drugged up so I wouldn't tear my own skin off. Turns out it's surprisingly easy to break a brain to people, just of 24/7 abusing, gaslighting, and drug use, and then try to kill them when they leave. She's not a good person, and she did it to herself, so I have no sympathy. What she did to herself while on meth was bad enough. What she did to me. Jesus, thank I wasn't raised by her. Oh my God. Jeez. No way you could have predicted that. Sorry it turned out to be so horrible. I'm glad you got away from her. Both times? What one decision or mistake has changed your whole life? Leave a comment, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more same videos.